What's up, YouTube? Back here to give you my February 2020 reading wrap-up. It was probably a pretty mediocre month for me in terms of reading books. As I've said before in a number of other videos, I'm actually a pretty picky reader, and so I look for books that I'm really confident that I'm going to be able to not only start, but finish. And then when I find those, when I'm able to start it and finish it, that's usually a good sign that the book was pretty engaging for me, because I DNF a lot of books, more so in the past than really right now. But if something is going on with the book that I'm just not feeling, then I'm just going to be like, you know what, it's a wrap. I'm just not even going to go there. I'm not even going to try to pretend, not even going to try to overly fight through it. And so, that being said, I did finish 4 books for the month of February in 2020. That's putting me at this point, the time of filming this video, which is February 29th. That puts me 2 books ahead of my pace for the year 2020 as far as the Goodreads challenge. And I pledged to read 50 books, and so I'm in pretty good shape right now. And part of that is because I was able to finish 4 books again in the month of February. So I'm going to just briefly go over the 4 books that I read in the month of February, just give a quick overview, and then we'll just go ahead and wrap it up. So the first book that I finished in the month of February was a follow-up to a book from the same author that I really enjoyed earlier. And the book I enjoyed earlier was Final Girls by Riley Sager. And the second book that I decided to read by Riley Sager was The Last Time I Lied. And I've actually had a chance to see some other booktubers who have taken an opportunity to review this particular book, and some of the reviews have been pretty mixed. I actually read the reviews on Goodreads, and then I read the reviews on Amazon as well, and again, a pretty mixed reception for The Last Time I Lied. I personally really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I found it really interesting. It takes place at a summer camp, which was interesting to me. It involves young people. It has a murder mystery angle. And I just really, I really got into it. Now, there's some flaws that people have seen with this book that really prompted them to give it 1 and 2 star reviews, or for some people to just straight up DNF it. And I get some of the criticisms that people have of the book, but for me, the criticisms did not stop me from really wanting to start this book, power through this book, and to finish this book. I was really excited to find out how the book was going to end, and the ending has a twist that I don't think you could really guess. Some people will say they could, but in reality you couldn't. So 4 out of 5 stars for me for The Last Time I Lied. To be honest with you, I probably in some ways liked it even more than Final Girls. I know that's a very controversial thing to say, but that's how much I really did enjoy this book, and I do enjoy Riley Sager books, and will definitely be looking at other Riley Sager books to read in the future. Next up for me in the month of February was a book that I actually pre-ordered and I was excited to read. It did sit on my shelf for a little bit before I finally decided to pick it up, and that was A Small Town by Thomas Perry. And I was really interested in this book because it really talks about a horrific event, a massive prison break that happens at a prison outside of a small town, hence the name, and just horrible things happen after the prison break in the town, and essentially one of the local police officers is basically charged with the task of tracking down the men who escaped and dealing old-fashioned frontier justice. So I'll leave it at that. It was really a book that I enjoyed. I did start it. I did finish it, which again is a good sign for a book. I really enjoyed it. I was curious to see how it was going to end. The book maybe lacks a little bit of depth that I think would have really made this book take off. But it still is an interesting story, and it's one of those stories that I think once most people start it, if they're reasonably fair-minded, you'll want to see how this book is going to end. I wanted to see how it was going to end. I was a little bit disappointed in the ending, but at the same time, it was a reading that I just wanted to finish because I was just curious what, if any, subplots were going to develop and what the ending was going to look like. So, yeah, it was a good, solid story, not a really good story, not a great story, but it was a solid read, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in the month of February 2020 was Deadly Drive, which was kind of a youth book, sort of a young adult, but really more of a probably a children's type book. It was an interesting story about a young girl who was a basketball player, which kind of caught my attention too. And an incident happens in her family, and it becomes traumatizing to her. And then a mystery sort of develops during the book that kind of puts you in a position of really wanting to see how it's going to end, how things are going to resolve. And it's a really quick read. Again, it's kind of a children's book in a lot of ways. You could maybe argue young adult, but I did go through to finish it to see how it was going to happen. It is very basketball heavy, so if you're not a big basketball fan, and maybe even if you are, there might be a little too much of that for you to really to get into, and it could probably lose some people. But I was curious to see how it was going to end, and it was an interesting ending, probably somewhat predictable, but I did enjoy it. Had a sense of justice at the end that was kind of interesting. It was kind of a moral play, so to speak, that was going on in the story that was really interesting. But I did get through to the end of it. It was a very quick read. I finished it. You know, some people might say, well, you know, you use it to kind of pad your Goodreads number a little bit. And maybe, I don't know, to some extent, maybe that will end up being the case. But it was a story that I thought was interesting, and it was a really quick read, so I decided to go ahead and jump on it. And I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I probably would have gone 2.5. It just was an interesting story, but wasn't probably as compelling. It was maybe a little bit basketball heavy, even though I'm a big basketball guy. But I did enjoy reading it. I'm glad I read it. Do not regret reading it at all. And it is an interesting story that I think some people would really get into, especially for a young adult story with trauma that a child has to go through, and then to see the resolution at the end. So that was really interesting. And so again, that was Deadly Drive that I read. Solid book, quick read. So again, 3 out of 5. And then lastly, for the month of February is I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. And this is a really interesting story. It does have a racial angle, and it includes a riot that happens at a high school football game that puts the two main characters together, not by choice, as they end up trying to basically fight to survive their way out of this riot that's taken place, or that started at this football game in this football stadium, and they work their way out of it. And then it becomes like the movie The Warriors, if you remember that, where they have to sort of navigate and to some extent fight their way through the streets to get back to their homes. And there's just all kinds of adventures along the way, and the relationship is rocky at times and kind of interesting, but it was a really fast read. I really enjoyed it. There was some maybe annoying character traits with both of the characters at different times that will sometimes maybe drive you a little bit nuts, but it was an interesting story. It's co-written by Kimberly Jones and Jilly Siegel, and the story is told from alternating perspectives, from the different perspectives of the two main characters in the story. But I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 out of 5. And it's not that it's a super great story that in the way that a lot of people I think would want to see it, but it was really interesting, and I like stories with a racial angle, and with the two characters sort of being joined at the hip, almost like not literally and physically, but sort of emotionally handcuffed together, trying to work their way out of some very dangerous situations. They kind of learn a lot about themselves, and they learn a lot about each other along the way in this kind of at times scary and at times sweet journey that these two take, from the danger of the riot scene through the riot scene in different areas of the town as things really begin to heat up and explode, to an incident that happens that really challenges everybody involved at the end of the story. So really interesting read. I really enjoyed it and would definitely recommend it. It's something that I think you can read. It's almost like an airport read, and that would be really enjoyable and really cause you to maybe think a little bit more critically about things, especially as it relates to race and just generally speaking, how we interact with each other, especially people who are strangers at one point but then evolve into something different. So interesting story. The way it ends, it could be left open to a potential sequel, so we'll see if that does transpire. It could. Then again, it kind of ends in a way that could be satisfying to a lot of people. So yeah, I'm Not Dying With You Tonight. Interesting story. Really quick, solid read. So those are my books that I read for the month of February in 2020. I'm really excited about the month of March. I've got some really good books that I'm looking forward to jumping into, and hopefully I'll have a really strong month. It was a 4-book read this month, so I was a little bit down for the month of January when I had 6 that I read. So I'm hoping to get back up into the 5 or 6 range because I got some books that I'm really excited about for the month of March, and I've got a couple of really good pre-order books that are going to be delivered in the month of March that I'm excited about as well, and I'm looking forward to talking about those books as well. So if you really like the content that you heard today, please consider hitting the like button for this video. If you're interested in hearing about books that I read and about the writing that I'm doing to hopefully get a traditionally published book out here, I'm hoping in the next year to 2 years, then please consider hitting the subscribe button for this channel. And hopefully I'll see you back again for more videos about reading and more videos about writing right here on BookTube.